Sean Pickett here with Sales Integrity. Thank you for stopping by the Sales Integrity Podcast. Today we continue our discussion on the topic of prospecting on purpose. So without further ado, let's get today's episode rocking and rolling. Welcome back to the Sales Integrity Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Pickett of Sales Integrity, and I look forward to diving back into our Prospecting on Purpose series. This series has gotten a lot of good feedback from our listeners out there, from our audience, so I appreciate all of the input that you've provided and feedback and kind of the direction that you want Prospecting on Purpose to this series to go. And so we're going to continue on with our sales prospecting by the numbers approach. We had part one in our previous podcast where we talked a lot more about persistence and number of touch points it takes to be successful in the B2B complex technical sale. Just a quick highlight or summary. We talked about 3 mind-blowing sales statistics that were provided by HubSpot. HubSpot actually aggregated these from across the internet. So just to do a quick recap, the average salesperson only makes 2 attempts to reach a prospect. The source there was SiriusDecisions. 93% of converted leads are contacted by the 6th call attempt. The source there was Velocify. And then the third mind-blowing sales statistic that we had reviewed in our last podcast episode was this. In 2007, it took an average of 3.68 cold call attempts to reach a prospect. Today, it takes 8 attempts, and the source there is Telenet and Ovation Sales Group. So really what we have focused on previously, we had looked at 50% of prospecting time is unproductive, and that professional persistence, if you just apply a professional, persistent, systematic, consistent approach to your sales game as it relates to prospecting and just following up and following through, you're gonna outlast your peers. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Today we're going to look at prospecting by the numbers part 2, and we're going to do that by looking at the next mind-blowing sales statistic. It's the source here is Discover.org, and the stat is this: 78% of decision makers polled have taken an appointment or attended an event that came from an email or cold call. So let me repeat that. 78% of decision makers polled have taken an appointment or attended an event that came from an email or cold call. And the source is Discover.org. So that's an interesting statistic because you see a lot of articles out there in the great debate about, cold calling versus social selling. Social selling is the it thing right now. Cold calling is dead. This is what a lot of the social media, social selling gurus are saying. Yet when Discover.org went and polled and researched actual decision makers, 78% of them said they've taken an appointment or attended an event that came from an email or cold call. So I'm going to pause there, and we're just going to look at some recommendations I have based on this statistic. What this really tells me is you need a well-balanced prospecting approach. You need a mix of strategies you're going to draw from, not just social selling. That does need to be part of the mix, but strategic networking, referral-based selling. We'll get to that here in a minute. And a mix of proactive outbound calling, using the phone, picking up the phone and making outbound calls, not just waiting for inbound calls to come in, and combining that with the use of emails. So there's a 1-2 punch of a call and an email. I could tell you firsthand, through Sales Integrity, we work with companies that have a B2B complex technical sale. We have part of our Prospecting on Purpose program, we teach a method called systematic sales messaging. And within systematic sales messaging, it has that 1-2 punch of an outbound call coupled with an email immediately sent right after that call. And the reason why we have that approach is because we know that 95% of all outbound proactive calls are going to result in a voicemail. And the greatest mistake that a lot of sales professionals make is not leaving a voicemail. So if you're not leaving a voicemail, it's the equivalent, of that old question, if a tree falls in the forest and no one's around to hear it, does it actually make a sound? Well, I always like to say if a sales professional calls a prospect and hangs up without leaving a voicemail, does that sales professional really exist in the mind of the prospect? No, they'll never know that you called. And don't fool yourself. They're not checking caller ID and waiting with bated breath to see who called me and go looking that up, right? So a voicemail is a wonderful way to get on their radar, start to etch yourself into the subconscious mind, and you could build a relationship through a series of touch points, value-added touch points, through the combination of voicemail and email. So just keep that in mind, that the consistency and the quality, those two things combined, of the voicemail and of the touch points that you're reaching out through this approach is going to be really, really key in starting to establish credibility and starting to build a relationship even before you connect with them live. So again, apply a systematic sales messaging approach. It's the combination of proactive outbound calling combined with emails. And here's some keys, here's some tips or pointers as you're doing this. First of all, the voicemail message needs to be succinct. It needs to get right to the point. So you can't ramble on and on. They're not going to listen to it that long. So you want to get right to the point. Another tip is don't frustrate them. If your message is actually a good one, they're going to want to write down your name, company name, and more importantly, your number to get back to you. And for those that like to pick up the phone and call you back. So if that's the case, don't wait to leave your number to the end of the message. Open up with it. Right. So, here's an example. Good morning. This is Sean Pickett with Sales Integrity. You can reach me at 214-516-7983. And then whoever the name is of the person, let's just say it's Bob. Bob, I know you're busy, so I'll get right to the point. And now that's a real trigger point here. Number one, you've left your contact information up front. You answered the question in their mind, who is this person? And then if they do choose to replay it, to write down your number, they're not going to have to wait through the whole voicemail message again. They can get it right up front and keep replaying it from the beginning. And then the other thing is they're thinking, man, I'm really busy. I don't have time for this. And so that's why you're going to say, I know you're busy, so I'll get right to the point. That's going to cause them to want to listen longer. So those are different influence and persuasion techniques. Just a couple tips there when it comes to that. You're going to have to come up with your message. But here's a couple more tips on how you can do that. First and foremost, you should call on the exact same role in the same industry and the same types of companies. So for instance, if you're going to call on chief information security officers or CISOs, CISOs, however you want to pronounce that, at financial services companies, then queue up 25 of those to call in a 90-minute block of time. You're going to account for one or two conversations, and the rest are going to be voicemails. So it gives you enough time to get through your list and leave the voicemails. But you also kind of build up through the power of repetition that messaging. So if you do talk to one early in the call block of time that you've set aside, later on when you talk to another one, you can reference that material, that information you had in that discussion. You could say something like, I was speaking to one of your peers just a little bit ago. They said that this was a challenge. Just wanted to know if that's a challenge for you as well. Then they're really going to say, wow, they really do specialize in working with people like me. So you get in a rhythm, in a flow, and you keep your same message targeted towards that same role in the same industry and the same types of companies. And the reason why you want to do that is because the voicemail is you're going to highlight a case study. You're going to highlight a case study or a customer success story or an example. So we specialize in helping chief information security officers at financial services companies. We helped XYZ Corporation achieve, ABC. I'd like to simply share with you how we were able to do that, see if it's applicable to your situation. That's a laid-back, non-threatening, you're sharing a success story, and all of these executives like to keep up with their peers and what's going on in the industry. That's how they're getting their information, so you're going to highlight that. And then really that key is focus on sharing, not selling. Again, focus on sharing and not selling. So you're simply sharing information with them that would be useful. So that's value added. It's going to add value to what they're trying to do versus you selling. I've got this product or service that helps out with this issue. So there's a key difference there, which is I want to share with you how we help one of your peers achieve XYZ, whatever that may be. That's going to be more interesting than I've got a product I want to sell you and I sold it to one of your peers. So it's a slight nuance, slight difference, but focus on sharing and not selling. So that's the first stat there, the first mind-blowing sales statistic, which is probably, contrary to what a lot of the audience may have heard recently, which is social selling is everything and cold calling is dead. That stat, again, is 78% of decision makers polled have taken an appointment or attended an event that came from an email or cold call. All right, let's wrap up today's episode with just some highlights of the recommendations that I made today based on today's mind-blowing sales statistic. So first with the statistic, 78% of decision makers polled have taken an appointment or attended an event that came from an email or cold call. The source there is Discover.org. What that tells us is cold calling is alive and well. It's not dead, contrary to popular opinion by a lot of social selling gurus. So the major recommendation is you should incorporate a proactive outbound calling combined with emailing campaign into your overall prospecting sales game. That'll help you prospect on purpose. So a few recommendations that I made today on how to do that. First and foremost, you should target the same role in the same industry. So figure out the same types of senior executives in the same role in the same industry. The example I gave was CISOs, Chief Information Security Officers in the financial services industry, for instance. And so you want to create a list of 25 of those, preferably in your CRM system. So you got them all neatly organized into a task list. And you're going to then create messaging before you pick up the phone and start calling them. You're going to create very targeted messaging that's timely and relevant for that role in that industry. The way you're going to do that is you're going to highlight a case study or a customer success story, and that's going to be the value point that you want to dangle out there in a voicemail or quickly highlight that you'd like to share that with them in a live discussion for the 5% that you do get. And again, just to revisit, 95% of your calls will result in voicemail, 5% will result in a live call. So you should create a live script to prepare for those live discussions, and then obviously a voicemail script to prepare for the voicemail sessions. Okay, and then the highlight there is you've helped their peers in the same role in the same industry achieve something that they're looking to achieve as it relates to their challenges, issues, and goals. And that the real purpose of that call is to schedule an appointment to simply share that with them. So you're going to focus on sharing and not selling. So that's going to be real key there as well. And then be succinct and get to the point. You don't want these things to be long and rambling. You want to be succinct and get to the point, both in the live discussion and in the voicemail. So that wraps it up for today's episode. We're going to go ahead and end here with a few quick reminders. All right. Reminder number 1, if you haven't signed up for our free 7-day video email course titled 7 Steps to Master the Game of Complex Technical Selling, then you should do so right away. Go ahead and visit mastercomplexselling.com. Again, it's mastercomplexselling.com. Reminder number 2, if you want to ask a question and have me feature that on the podcast to answer your question, then just send an email to asksean@salesintegrity.com. Again, it's Ask Sean, and I spell it SEAN. So Ask Sean at salesintegrity.com. Number 3, if you haven't already done so, please rate the show. If you've been listening a few times and you get a sense of what the show is about and you feel comfortable, I greatly appreciate a 5-star rating and a quick 1 to 2 sentence review. You could do so on iTunes. Just search for the show and then click the ratings and reviews and go ahead and just add it there. And then final reminder, if you haven't already joined one of our 2 B2B Tech Sales Professionals group, you could do so on either Facebook or LinkedIn. Just go ahead and search for B2B Tech Sales Professionals, and it'll pop up, and you could just join right there. So once again, thank you for listening to today's episode. Go out there today and help your customers buy what they want, what they need, and what benefits them. And most importantly, go out there and make it a great day.